Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we are the Youngs.
We're so glad you've joined us today.
Yes, we are. And we hope you enjoyed that teaser there at the end of this new section we're doing on singleness.
Yes.
And listen, if you're single and you're tuning in for this reason, hey, just stop right now, grab your phone there and text a few friends and say, hey, you got to listen to this. And because we really want to help you that are single, encourage you, strengthen you, give you some practical wisdom and advice.
Right.
And I hope you've liked it, shared it, you've subscribed, and tell somebody else about it. And most of all, hope you're putting into practice the things we're teaching.
And the series that we did before this about enjoying your singleness and all of the practical suggestions there. And now we're in a series about finding a spouse. And so we hope that it's all very good so that you can take the former series of just enjoying your singleness and then bring that into, okay, maybe the Lord would have me find a spouse.
Yes, we want these two to go together.
Yes.
You're single, so enjoying it, but many of you do want to be married, so what can we talk about to help you with both of those?
Right.
So the first two episodes, we talked about enjoying it. These next few episodes here, we're talking about just finding a spouse. So if you were with us last week, let's just jump right in. You ready to go?
Oh, yes.
If you were with us last week, we started the episode by the point, think wisely, biblically about marriage.
Yes.
And if you didn't take the time somewhere to write down that book, we recommend Get Married by Brad Wilcox. That's excellent. In fact, I think it's good for singles to occasionally read books about marriage. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Part of reading a book about marriage is just preparing yourself for that time when you will get married.
Right.
It's not to make your heart, discontent with singleness. Don't let that happen, but it's okay to read books about, how can I learn in this area? I'm not there yet, but maybe someday I'll be married. Read books on marriage. And if you'd like some, we can recommend some to you as well.
Right.
And so you could reach out to us about that. Bethany and I know tons of books about marriage.
Yes,
so the
do.
first truth was think wisely about marriage. Did you have any other thought that came to your mind before we jump into the second point today?
I don't think so. I think we covered that one well, and we had already jumped into the second point.
Which is number 2.
Be practical in your approach.
Be practical in your approach to finding a spouse. So number 1, we said be open to dating.
Yes.
And I hope you took that with the heart in which we're sharing it. So many times when you're single, the longer you're single, the more difficult it can be to think well about that, the idea of dating.
Right.
And yet the point of a date is a friendship. The point of a date is just to enjoy someone else's couple. There's no commitment. It doesn't mean you're getting married, and it doesn't mean any of those things. But if someone says, hey, I'd be interested in taking you out sometime, say, well, hey, let's do it. Shock them. Or if you're uneasy about that, just say, I'd love to do that, but could I bring a couple of our friends along?
Right.
So it'd be okay to, go out with 2 or 3 people. You don't have to do it alone if it's, if there's an uneasiness about it.
Right.
But there's also nothing wrong with having a public relationship. Mm-hmm. Someone come to your place, they pick you up, you get in the car, you drive in the public to a restaurant, you walk into a public restaurant, you sit down surrounded by dozens of people, and then someone drives you home and tells you good night. Or goodbye, or I will never see you again. I don't know how that would work out for you. But the idea there is just be open to it. It's okay to have a friendship. Girls, it's okay if a guy asks you out. There may be a reason that you would say, absolutely not. You know something about the guy and you're like, there's never I will die single before I would even consider marrying that person.
Right.
But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with being friends. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with having a meal with someone else, or seeing a movie with someone else, or whatever the relationship might be. So the idea is be open to dating. Anything you would add to that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so then what's the second practical piece of advice?
The second practical piece is to be friendly.
Now that's multifaceted too. And the reason I put that in there is because it is easy, and maybe it goes back to the last episode about enjoying singleness. Don't allow your singleness to cause you to become withdrawn. Mm-hmm. To cause you to become, you're like, well, I hate going to this, and I hate doing that, and I don't want to be there, and oh my word, I'm the third wheel. Well, if you're the third wheel, be a fun third wheel. If you're the fifth wheel, be a fun fifth wheel. We had someone recently telling us about, before they got married, she said her husband was the fifth wheel with a couple of friends, and they're still friends with that couple.
Yes.
But it wasn't a negative thing. It wasn't a bad thing. He enjoyed their company. They enjoyed his company. They did things, the five of them together,
Yes.
four of them married, one of them single. Now there are, six people in that, three couples that are married.
Right.
And have served the Lord together. So be friendly. It's okay to smile. And I don't mean just to, girls to the guys at church that are single or guys to the girls at church that are single. Be friendly across the board. You might be friendly to an older lady in your church who says, "Hey, is there a chance you'd let me introduce you to my grandson?"
Right.
Or to an older man who would say, "I have a granddaughter. I have a grandson." So the idea is to be friendly, be open to dating, and combine that with being friendly.
Right. And I think we might have covered this when we did the episodes on enjoying your singleness, but there can be a time where we get this edge to us. And even married ladies can do this too. And there are all kinds of Instagram reels making fun of women who are not sweet-spirited. But the Bible has a lot to say about our spirit, that our spirit should be at rest, that our spirit should be meek and quiet, that our spirit should be joyful and loving.
Yeah.
And so,
in the words of Daniel, excellent.
Yes. And so I think even as a single lady, if you are maybe looking for a spouse or open to what God has for you, if you have that little bitter edge to you and you don't have that sweet spirit, it's going to be harder. It will be harder. And even gentlemen, if you have that little edge to you. And so have a sweet spirit. It helps you to have better health. The Bible does say, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine." And it just helps with your friendships. People are more open to being around you instead of being like, "Wow, she can just really cut you off, can't she?" Or she's a little difficult to be around. So just be friendly. And honestly, when it comes to finding a spouse, I know that when my boys, when they were all around college age, and we might suggest different young ladies to them or whatever, and I would think, "Wow, she's really pretty and she seems really with it." My boys would say things like, "Oh, Mom, she's got kind of a mean tongue," or, "Oh, Mom, she never smiles. I would never want to ask her out." And so, girls, it is important that you have a sweet spirit. Men don't want to marry a woman who's mean-spirited. They just
Sure.
don't.
And guys, women don't want to marry a guy who's surly, who's
Right.
who's difficult, who's always sarcastic and belittling and demeaning, or
Yes.
withdrawn and very self-absorbed. So just pretty simple. Here's practical advice. How do you find a spouse? Number 1, be open to dating. Number 2, be friendly. Number 3, be where other singles are. And can be a little bit difficult depending on where you are, but there are many opportunities to be where other singles are that we would encourage you to take advantage of.
Yes, and I know that can sound a little awkward too, like, "Oh, no, I don't want to go to the singles activity just because." Well, go to the singles activity because you want to be part of your singles ministry at your church. But there are other singles there that might be an opportunity for you to meet.
Yes, and if that could be a singles Sunday school class, that could be a singles event get together. I know the Wilds in North Carolina has a singles event. I think Camp Kobiak has a singles event. So there are many places around the country that have events for Christian singles. And it's an opportunity, and you say, "Well, I don't want to go there because I'll look desperate." No, you won't. It's an idea to go there and have fun.
Yes.
To go and just enjoy the company of other people who are at the same season of life that you're in. And the fact of the matter is, if you are never around a single guy, ladies, then there's probably limited chances of ever finding one to marry.
True.
But guys, if you're never around a single lady, then you're never going to find one to marry. So it's important to be where other singles are.
Yes.
And if you would like some suggestions even on events and places where, there are activities and events and things for singles. But I don't think I told you this, sweetheart, but I just recently got an invitation. A couple that we helped some as they were getting ready for marriage, some friends of theirs have started a singles event. And it's just, for young adults to get together, to have fellowship, to hear some teaching, to study the Bible together. And he said, we started this small, but our last one had 100 singles at it.
Wow.
And so it just shows there is a need. There's a longing.
Yes.
So I just say be where other singles are.
Well, yes. And then you get good Christian fellowship, but also you might have that opportunity. And I would say you could even be open to some type of social media. I know I met someone recently who said that they met on Christian Mingle. So they were just looking up different people, and it was kind of like, well, I'll just give this a try. Well, give it a try prayerfully. Maybe talk to your parents about it or some trusted older people just to see if they think that might be a good fit for you. But there's nothing wrong with that. We have met also other people who have met over social media. Maybe they are friends of friends and they just see a picture and they think, and so they reach out to their friend. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you feel like, well, I'm in this church of 40 people and I'm the only single here. So it's okay for you to reach out and use technology in the way that God intends it to be used.
Yes, and it is a gift from God that we have such technological advances in our culture. And of course, you don't want to do that alone. You want to have someone who has the power of veto, someone who, you don't want to just, blindly step into a relationship knowing nothing about a person, which we'll talk about here before we finish this episode or this particular series. So I would just say to you, be where other singles are. Number 4, we could park on a long time, but let's just at least touch on it.
Okay.
Number 4, practical advice, be preparing. And by that, I mean, guys, look, get a job, get a job that pays well, get education, get a job that pays well, and start preparing. You may be as single can be, and maybe you will die single, but at least be preparing. Buy a house, get a nice apartment, buy a car. Be preparing to where you are at a place in your life to where you're working, you're making a living. You could have a wife and take care of a wife. That's about being preparing.
Yes.
And ladies, be preparing. Think ahead about, go ahead and buy a house on your side. You have an investment there. If you marry a guy, then you could sell that house. That's an investment.
Right.
And so be preparing and just think in practical terms. Guys have to learn to work and take care of finances and provide for their wife and take care of themselves physically, with their health and all of that. Girls, you have to learn how to do things like cook and take care of yourself and prepare for life. So just be preparing. If it's in your heart to get married, if in your heart you're like, I don't think I'm called to singleness, I think I want to be married someday, then take steps toward that. If you met Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or Mr. Wonderful or Mrs. Wonderful tomorrow, you are way down the road and you could just as easily step into a person to marriage with all kinds of favor and blessings and advancement that, say, a college kid doesn't have yet because they haven't yet, come up with that house and car and all that.
Right.
So anything you'd add to that on the be preparing?
Well, I would just say we have met young people from time to time, young adults they have these wonderful dreams about what they want to do with their future, but they haven't practically all assimilated it yet to how it's going to come into fruition. And so they have these huge dreams about, maybe I want to be a Christian person who does movies, who puts on movies. They're a producer. That's what I was thinking. That word wasn't coming to my head. I want to be this Christian producer of Christian filmmaking, but they haven't assimilated how that's all going to happen. And then at the same time, they desperately want to be dating and they desperately want to get married. And they're thinking to themselves, why isn't a girl coming into my life? Or why isn't a guy coming into my life? And maybe it's just because the Lord is like, well, maybe you need to get a job. Maybe you need to do something with your life right now. It's not that your big dream of whatever it is isn't ever going to come to fruition. It's not that the Lord doesn't want to give you the desires of your heart, but it could be that you're just not being very practical right now. And maybe you could get a job in some sort of media that will actually help you learn all of that stuff. And you're also prepared to take care of a wife or prepared to go into marriage.
Yeah, one of the dangers of our culture is that we want the success and we want it fast.
Yes.
And what you find is that most people start small. Start at the bottom, start at the beginning, and then slowly over a course of years and sometimes over a lifetime, build the life that we look at and think, that's what I want to do.
Yes.
And so, you don't want to marry a person who's sitting around waiting for the big event to happen.
Yes.
You want to be preparing, so if you have a dream, then get started in the small things that's at least taking steps toward the beginning. The beginning. Right. And the Bible even refers to the beginning of small things, and to how that, it starts little. Things always start little. Rarely, and sometimes it's even dangerous if a person becomes too big too fast because they don't know how to handle it.
Right.
And they become, it becomes normal to them to have this huge success because problems come to everybody, failures and loss and struggles. And so it's just a matter of being prepared. If you're going to pursue marriage, my single friends, start by be preparing. That's the word, be prepared.
Yes, and don't be too big for your britches. I guess I could say it that way. Don't be too proud to be like, well, I got to start somewhere, so I'm going to get this job, and then I will work my way up.
Absolutely. Here's number 5: be more biblical than cultural. Now we've touched on that already.
Yes.
But what I want to talk to you about here is this idea of focusing on character and not image.
Yes.
One of the things that's just devastating to our culture is that we have all of these, the social media imagery has taught our generation that here's the perfect body, here's the perfect personality, here's the perfect scenario. And really, we can become so image conscious, like a young man. I know there was one young man I remember telling me one time, he was like, I want to marry a wife that works out, and that way she always has a nice body. Mm-hmm. Well, sir, your wife, if you get married and your wife has a baby, her body's going to change. And what you're missing in our culture is like, oh my word, she's gained a little weight, so therefore she's not beautiful. That is absolutely categorically unbiblical. A person is beautiful because of their character. They're beautiful because of their whole person. They're beautiful because of their eyes. They're beautiful because of their tone and their words. And, obviously, Bethany and I work hard at looking nice. We try to dress well. We try to take care of ourselves. We try to eat well. If there's something about me she doesn't like, if she thinks my beard is too full, then I'm going to trim it. If my hair is too long, I'm going to cut it. So there's nothing wrong with being aware of one another. That's always important. But our culture has gotten so focused on, does he work out? Is he going to always look handsome for me? And she's too tall. She's too short. We're missing the point that God designed us as total beings.
Yes.
And we have to continually focus on being more biblical than cultural, focusing on character, focusing on the prepared. If you meet a young man and maybe he's not your teenage image of the prince, the perfect prince, but he's a hardworking young man. He's a godly young man. Mm-hmm. He takes care of himself. He's made wise, taken wise steps about preparing, and he's working hard. That's a young man you ought to consider, because that's a young man when you are 40 years from now older that will be worth your having. Mm-hmm. And guys, if you meet a young lady and she's a hard worker, she's polite, she's sweet-spirited, she's disciplined, she's kind, she's conscientious, then that's a young lady you ought to be pursuing. But she's not blonde. Well, then get over that. So we've got to think more from the biblical perspective than the cultural perspective.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I would say even to you young ladies, there is a lot of pressure from our culture for us to embrace a certain image. Because we are constantly surrounded on social media and then also billboards and advertisements of these airbrushed and filtered ladies who, if you met them in person, and guys who probably don't look like that in real life at all, because God just created us in his own image, and so we are beautiful in the way God has created us, but we do live in a sin-cursed world. So there's that pressure that some young ladies can have, like, well, who's going to want to go out with me because I don't look like that model, or I don't look like that lady, or whatever. Don't put that pressure on yourself. Know that God has created you, and you are wonderfully made and fearfully made, and that you can just embrace how he made you. Obviously, there are young ladies who go the opposite way and are like, I don't need to be pressured by that. And then they just kind of let themselves go. God doesn't want us to do that either, because he has given us this body that we are supposed to take care of. That's a whole nother episode.
And he's given us beauty.
Yes.
And that is part of his gift to us.
Yes. And so there's nothing wrong with fixing up, with doing your hair and putting on makeup if you feel like you need a little bit, and putting on nice clothing, and then just taking care of yourself, eating well and exercising and things like that. So you shouldn't have pressure either way. So young ladies, don't put that pressure on yourself. Work more on your character, on having that sweet spirit, on being friendly, on having a servant's heart, because that what is a total package that makes you attractive from the inside out.
And men, I'm going to just say it, get a haircut. It's okay to trim up your beard, to shave. It's okay to press your clothes. It's okay to be a sharp young man.
Take a shower.
Take care of yourself. And sometimes some of you young guys, you just let yourself go. You just let your hair grow, and your hair is just everywhere. And you don't look presentable. It makes you look lazy. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're not, but it does matter. We're to take care of ourselves. We are to think biblically. We're to have character and integrity, and we are to be sharp. The Bible says we're to adorn the grace of God. We're to dress it up. Right. And for those of us that are Christians, we're to make Christianity look good by how we present ourselves and all of that. And of course, the heart is more important than all of that, because you can look good outwardly and be inwardly a jerk. You can look good outwardly and be inwardly perverted. Mm-hmm. I'm aware of all of that, but at the same time, you can be a really nice guy, but you haven't taken care of yourself, and nobody's going to trust you because you look like you don't have the discipline to care for yourself.
That's true.
So I'm just saying, be more biblical than cultural there. Focus on character. Focus on prepared. That's just a practical approach to finding a spouse.
Yes.
And here's 3 more before we run out of time. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, be willing to ask for help.
Yes.
Now that's a hard one, isn't it?
It is.
Because we are a culture like, don't bother me about dating. Do not try to set me up. Listen, if you have a desire to be married, it's okay to say to people you know and trust, do you know of any guy? Do you know of any girl? Is there anyone you would suggest that I get to know? It's okay to ask for help.
It is. And I would say, even just personally, just coming from the point that we just made about be more biblical than cultural, if you're feeling like, I really would like to date, and I wonder if there's some things that maybe I could work on. Go out with a trusted lady in your church, maybe your mom, or maybe another Titus 2 type lady in your church, your pastor's wife, and just say, hey, I don't know, you know me well. Is there something that maybe I could work on, that maybe I could have a sweeter spirit? It might be a little bit of an awkward conversation. Maybe just ask your friends. When you're with your friends, you can be silly and crazy and chaotic and so much fun. But sometimes if you act like that in front of a young man, it just is kind of like, whoa, she's a little unhinged. So, just ask your friends, are there some things that maybe I should shore up a little bit? Maybe you have a little awkwardness that you don't know that you have. There are people who get in your personal bubble. They get super close to you when they talk to you. And I honestly think they don't know that that's awkward. So ask your friends, get 2 inches from their nose and say, hey, is there anything awkward about me? And just see if there's some help that they could help you, and just say, well, yeah, you could stand about a foot away instead of 2 inches away.
Yeah. And sometimes you may just get practical advice. Some of you young guys, maybe, some of you guys stay up, all hours of the night. You play video games, so you're tired in the morning, you're grouchy, you don't feel well because you're wasting so much time. And maybe the deal for you is you need to start getting up at 5 a.m. and exercising, reading your Bible, having breakfast, out the door for work or out the door for school. You gotta focus here on being prepared, asking for help. Open the door to be counseled, to be mentored. Asking for help, maybe, hey, I want to improve myself. What can I do to improve myself? And it's important to get help on that and advice on that.
Yes.
Okay, we have 2 others here. I think we have plenty of time here. So be practical in your approach. Here's number 7. This one's going to be a good one. Allow others to set up dates. Now, here's why I put that in there. I put that in there because when I was in Bible college at Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida, I know that I would have never asked Bethlie Young on a date. Bethlie Dennis at the time.
Aww.
And I would have never asked Bethlie Dennis on a date because here was my perspective. I was never a cool kid, and I always felt like Bethlie was the cool kid.
Oh, no.
Those of you that know me, that went to college with me, would know, Dave Young wasn't known for being the cool kid. I didn't have the cool clothes, didn't run with the cool people. For one thing, I worked like a dog to pay my way through college, so basically I was either studying or working. And Bethlie is sitting here nodding her head because she knows that to be true. Yes. And so I wasn't the cool kid, but my sweetheart was one of those, bubbly personalities. She was part of the cool kids, at least in my perspective. And so I would have never asked her out, but I am so thankful that a friend of ours set us up on a date.
Yes.
And at first I wasn't going to go. And I was like, and then I even hesitated when I realized who she was setting me up with. I'm like, well, there is no way this girl's going to date me. There's no way. And yet, you know what? She set us up on a date. And by the end of one evening, we had a blast on that date. and it has always been one of the highlight memories of college, that date night.
Right.
Where we laughed and we talked and we teased and it was fun. And the next thing you know, we walked away with a new friendship. Mm-hmm. And we also walked away with, 3 or 4 dates that we had already planned.
Right.
And there was a reason for that. It was that you asked me on an outing, right?
Yes.
And then, she also asked me to a speech recital, but her parents were going to be there at the speech recital. And since we were just getting to know each other, we didn't, I was like, well, since I'm going to meet your parents, maybe we should have a couple of dates before that. So I, feel like I at least know you a little bit.
Right.
And so we actually had a couple of dates. Then I met her mom and dad, and then we went on an event together. And it was just the beginning of this relationship that had someone not set us up, I don't know that I would have ever asked you to go on a date. Because first of all, I didn't know you.
Right.
But secondly, when I did see who you were, I thought, well, she's way out of my league, and still is.
That's not true.
You still are out of my league.
Not true.
And I'm just highly favored by God. And so all that to say, be open to that. That's what I mean by that. Allow others to set up a date. If someone says, hey, there's somebody I want you to meet, can we all go to dinner together? Well, hey, don't be one of these like, absolutely not. I'm not having that. I'm not a part of that. It might very well be that God is answering your prayers by allowing a good friend of yours to introduce somebody into your life that would be like, you know what? I could marry this person, God, if this is your will.
Right. And can I say to those of us who are married, who so desperately want our single friends to be married because we know how wonderful marriage is, don't set your single friends up with people that you're just like, oh, but he's single and she's single. No, maybe they could, if you know that they're not going to go together, don't set them up. Don't set your poor single friends up for an awkward evening. Make sure that you're being wise about it too. If you are, your single friend's praying and you have another single friend, you're like, you know what? I really feel like they could go together. And that's what our friend in college, she said that to me, and she said that separately to David. You know what? I really feel like you guys would hit it off. And sure enough, the Lord had that in his mind and in his plan. So it was wonderful, but do be cautious. Those of us who are setting up our poor single friends, don't make it awkward.
So here's the last one. Number 8, in just be practical in your approach. Ask trusted mentors if they have anyone who would be a potential spouse, if they know of anyone. Ask a trusted mentor. Not just any, maybe your pastor, maybe, the director of your singles ministry, maybe your mom or dad.
Right.
Maybe, you have a second grandma or your own grandma. Ask trusted mentors, someone from Bible college who's just, when my daughter Abigail met our son-in-law David, one of the things that was amazing was there were mentors in his life who spoke volumes for him.
Yes.
Who said, hey, you should let your daughter date this guy. As a dad, I was so impressed by the people's evaluation of our David.
Yes.
Of how much they loved him and respected him and the young man that he was.
Yes.
And so you can ask trusted mentors if they have anyone or know of anyone who would be a potential spouse. That is simply practical advice in how to approach finding a spouse.
Yes.
All right. So 2 things we've taught you so far. Number 1, think about marriage wisely. Think wisely about marriage. And number 2, be prepared, be practical rather in your approach. We have one more thought to share with you on our next episode, and that is we want to talk to you about being wise in your approach.
Yes.
What about this internet thing? How can you navigate that wisely? What about Well, what about red flags? It's easy sometimes for couples to overlook red flags. Are there any questions you ought to ask? And I will share with you on our next episode the 5 questions that we ask in helping our children to find a spouse that you can ask in helping to evaluate the person of whom you're interested in. And so I hope you'll join us for that episode, and we'll have one final one in this teaching on thoughts for singles about finding a spouse. Any final thought before we sign off today?
I don't think so. We can look forward to the next episode.
Okay, this is Keeping It Young Podcast. You'll find us on the internet at keepingityoungpodcast.com. Give us a visit there. Every one of our 250 plus episodes are available on that website. And boy, do we cover a plethora of material. So check that out if we can be a help to you. If you have an idea for a future podcast, we would love to hear about that as well. Thanks so much for reaching out today. Bethlie and I are thankful for you and for the privilege you have given to us to serve you in this way. And we hope you'll continue to listen. This is Keeping Young, so have a great day. And remember to serve the Lord with gladness.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.